You're insane. You're in pain. I can tell by what you're saying, but...
I'm the Joker, baby! So damage, take the rattle. In battle. In rap battle. Battle! My daddy would beat me. Got scars, everybody can see me. Shoot guns on the street, please hit me. I'm dancing in the bathroom. I walk in. Christopher Walken. Ha 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 ha! Send in the goon, and he will attack you violently. With a break punch left, but switch from up, and that is how I win.
We really do live in a society.
So I grabbed a mint. What are mints? Why do we call them that? Because they smell like the plant? But they don't. Orange tea bags are mints, so maybe how they're eaten. Dissolve on the tongue. But then there's Mentos.
Hi, welcome to Film Stash. My name is Douglas Campbell, and today I'm going to bring you the scariest thing of all. Film discussion. No, but for real, I was gonna do a Joker review because we did get a sequel to Joker. Surprisingly, I honestly didn't think we would get one in the first place with how it ended off. Now, whenever that movie was coming out, it was deemed highly controversial. A lot of headlines were being spread. It was a movie for incels. It would have shaken our nation to its core. We didn't know what the aftermath of it was going to be. And then when it came out, not really anything happened. The only thing that really happened was that it was a box office juggernaut, being the first R-rated movie to make $1 billion, like, ever. It made me think that this film, it was highly controversial at the time. And so, fast forward 5 years later, you have a film that's going to be covering a lot of similar ground, but no controversy. So, why isn't there nearly as much online or in-person discourse over this movie? And so then I began to really, think even deeper. Movies that are deemed controversial or even have behind the scenes that stir quite a bit of public controversy, even though that happens a lot these days. What happens when they leave theaters and they get a second life at home? So I decided to nix the Joker review. Maybe I'll revisit that someday if there's a Joker 3. So after being a consumer of internet culture and movies and just general nonsense that's online, I've come to 3 possible conclusions that these films can take once they reach home theaters. Path number 1, mythification / damnation. And this is where I think the controversy of the film, it engulfs so much of its identity and the discourse over the discussion of said film that it becomes immortalized from said controversy. And there's tons of examples you could pull from. One that I could think of right off the top of my head, namely because I covered it. Links up there, by the way. When I covered the Crow series a while back, 5 movies are in that series. And the main thing that anybody talks about whenever you bring up those movies, it's the tragic death of Brandon Lee on set. Now, the death of Brandon Lee and the mismanagement of the gun safety of that first film, it's very controversial. It still is even happening today. Like, if you look at the incident with Alec Baldwin's movie Rust. But the controversy of that film, it has raised the film to a cult status beyond what I'd imagine most of the original crew thought they were going to get. Even if you haven't seen the original Crow, chances are you probably have heard of the tragic incident that happened on set and what happened to Brandon Lee. This one is a bit of a deeper cut, but if you are within the film community, you definitely have heard of this movie. I hope you've never seen it, and I never plan on covering on a Film Stash, so please don't ask. Please don't ask. Cannibal Holocaust is a film. Its reputation is so disturbing and gross. It's immortalized as one of the most disgusting and exploitative movies ever made. There's tons of stories that you could look up in terms of the film's production that are really disgusting. Here's a trigger warning, by the way. Skip ahead a couple seconds if you don't want to hear some of the details that happen. Like, this movie, in terms of trying to create a verisimilitude and exploitative nature, they use real animal deaths, like they seek animals out and they kill them, do simulated sexual acts in the film against people's wills that are absolutely disgusting. Buildings are set on fire with people inside to capture a sense of human suffering and death. They actually show human deaths through old war footage that they repurposed to look like found footage. It is absolutely disgusting. Where I had immortalized with The Crow, this movie, I say, would get a damnation status. It's immortalized for the wrong reasons, and that's where that would go.
Hey, editing Doug here. I just want to make it clear with my previous statement that both those movies, I did use them as examples for how they got immortalized. And what happened with Brandon Lee and The Crow, it never should have happened. It wasn't a good reason that that movie got immortalized.
I hope you're enjoying this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with your friends. Any support will be greatly appreciated. And now, back to the stash.
Path 2. Controversies fade, and the judgment awaits. And looking at this path where you have the controversies, they are there, but they kind of fade over time a little bit. And all that's left really is the merits of the film that you're looking at today. And this is where I think Joker 2019 lies. The marketing, if you looked at the movie, it tried to compare itself to Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. And then if you look at the audience reception, especially within the film community, they found that the movie was more comparable to Scorsese's The King of Comedy. For me looking at it, I think it's a pretty fair blend of both stories. And it does some things different for itself, but ultimately I feel like Joker, it just doesn't stand on its own. Joker ends up being just a solid movie, truly elevated by the lead performance of Joaquin Phoenix. No, believe me, it is truly an amazing performance. Like me revisiting it a couple nights ago, I truly forgot just how great his performance is. But ultimately, the film itself around that character, it just falls apart. It just isn't as great as that lead performance is. The movie is essentially Arthur gets beat up. Arthur goes somewhere else. He gets beat up mentally. He goes somewhere else. He gets beat up again. And it's that again and again and again until he becomes the Joker. He almost doesn't feel like a real character. And all of the outside world being against Arthur, just it doesn't feel as realistic. And you could argue that that was what people thought of mental health at the time. They didn't really take it seriously. They thought people were just weirdos and creeps. But Joker, ultimately, it's trying to convey a similar tone and feel, and to some degree, a message that at the very least Taxi Driver tried to cover. But ultimately, it's just not as subtle as Taxi Driver or The King of Comedy. A film like Taxi Driver, there was so many controversies surrounding that thing. You casted then 12-year-old Jodie Foster to play a child prostitute. There's the racism of the city in the 1970s. And then there's the controversies outside the movie. There was the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan because the shooter wanted to impress Jodie Foster. But ultimately, if you look at the film as a whole, it acts as a period piece of 1970s America, and particularly New York in a period that comparable to what New York is today. It's very different than what Taxi Driver's New York was. And it's really more a commentary on the effects of loneliness and what loneliness will do to a person, and that it will just eat through anybody. It will cause you to do some potentially destructive things. What does society do with those people? And I say all this about Joker, I still think it's a decent film at the end of the day. Now, what will keep Joker relevant, despite it being a little derivative of both Taxi Driver and King of Comedy, at the end of the day, it will be a part of the cinematic legacy of the Batman films. Even though Batman isn't in it, he's a Batman character, and that's going to be part of that legacy forever. Part 3. Bar Trivia. Alright, so this one, it's a little sillier. Obviously, with that, you kind of get the point of what I'm saying here. It's on the more extreme end of my previous point. So, like what I mentioned with the previous path, the controversy itself fades away, sometimes to nothing. In this case, it fades away to nothing. But then the film itself, it doesn't have enough cultural relevance. It's not even really well received. And it just also fades away to nothing. The result is a movie that just fades away. and it feels like a distant memory. You get this disruption, it comes out, and then dissipates to nothing. It's like a fart in the wind. It only gets brought up on the very rarest occasions. The very rarest. Like bar trivia. To the point that you even forgot that the movie or said controversy even happened. An example that immediately comes to mind for me, it is Seth Rogen and James Franco's comedy, The Interview. This was a film that had real-world ramifications. It was a premise that joked about the assassination attempt of the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. There were actual threats towards theaters if the movie ever got released. It was an insanely big deal that was in the news cycle for weeks. But then once it got released on streaming and people saw it was just kind of a mediocre comedy movie, it was almost immediately forgotten about. Same with the controversy. It was immediately forgotten about. Another is actually a pretty recent movie. It was Olivia Wilde's 2022 film Don't Worry, Darling. It was a thriller that focused on suburbia, particularly using the aesthetic of the 1950s housewives. But the only thing that you really heard of it, and from what the cycle of the internet followed, was way more interesting than the movie itself, it was the various controversies that kept popping up throughout the production. There was the whole spectacle with Olivia Wilde's divorce from her then-husband, Jason Sudeikis. There were various back and forths over why Shia LaBeouf wasn't in the movie. Well, one, the fact he was even involved is a controversy within itself. A big one was Wilde forming a relationship with one of the male leads, Harry Styles. And of course, don't forget the stupid one, Styles Spitgate with Chris Pine. So much drama and controversies established by the internet. And then when the movie came out, not really much fanfare. Critical reception was not great. It made the round on YouTube. Believe me, it definitely made a bit of a round on YouTube. And now, poof! Nobody thinks about that or the various controversies anymore. It's just kind of, it's a trivia fact now. In exploring this and thinking about it, I come back to my original question. Why isn't Joker 2 getting as much coverage, and why isn't there nearly as much controversies with this newest film? And truthfully, I think with how overhyped the original was in terms of what could happen, what could happen, what could happen, oh my god, what could happen, and the fact that we are in the midst of a very, very heated presidential election, I think people just didn't even know that it was coming out. Our expectations for what's to come with Joker 2, they have been hampered a bit. We kind of know what's to come to a degree. And whether Joker 2 will have controversies post its release, it's hard to say. But I still am excited to see it, and I don't know which path it will take, where it will go in its afterlife, but we'll see. Well, that's all the time we have for today here at Film Stash. My name is Douglas Campbell, and if you excuse me, I gotta add to the stash.
Mentos are chewy, all fruit flavored, and here they are on the shelves of the store with the audacity to consider themselves mints. So if we're just arbitrarily calling anything a mint, then what's stopping a cough drop or one of those old lady strawberry candies from being a mint? I'm gonna suck on some nickels and call it mints. What is this? What words have meaning?